Hare Krishna. Welcome to the Bond of Love interview series organized by Vaishnavi Ministry, North America's Vaishnavi Ministry. And today I have the honor and good fortune of speaking with Her Grace Jagattarini Devi Dasi, disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and someone that I'm really, really excited to talk to. So let's welcome her. Hare
Hare
Krishna. Please accept
Hare Krishna.
obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
I'm very, very excited to speak with you today. The part one, where you spoke to Govinda Priya Devidasi, was so filled with heart. I'll just say that. And so today I'm excited to continue that conversation. And I request you to speak about the instruction that Srila Prabhupada gave you. If you can speak a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, I was thinking, since we were going to do a part two, that it was important for me to accurately introduce myself, because here and there people get a bit sensational and they say all kinds of things. And I always feel it's much better to actually be in touch with what really happened. So, first of all, I was living in Sydney, in Australia. I had moved to Sydney to try and start an acting career, and I had been living there for 3 years. I had taken part in a TV series, 2 local films, and one film that was produced internationally. I was in my teens, just turning 20 and then turning 21, when I decided that, I laugh now, but I decided that Australia wasn't quite big enough for me, and that I should head towards London, because at that time, historically, London was considered the most sophisticated, arty place for a film actress to develop themselves. And so I was dreaming. It was all very much of a dream, because most of the time as an aspiring film actress, you spend time doing advertisements for all kinds of nonsense things, because you have to pay your rent. And as soon as you finish a job, you're without a job again. So it was actually a very unsettled kind of a career path. Yet there's a kind of glamour and like a carrot held up that possibly you could be amazing. That generates a kind of energy that pulls somebody further and further and further into it. And in the early 1970s, January 1970, I first came across devotees in Sydney. And at that time, I didn't have a job, and I was going through a park, and I saw these people chanting. And I thought they were Buddhists, and I went over and I looked at them, and they gave me a card, and the card said, "Chant Hare Krishna, it will free you from anxiety." And the word that struck me was anxiety, because the career path, as I said to you, it was fraught with all kinds of questionable things. So I took that home, I stuck it up in my little apartment kitchen, and when I was cooking, I would remember it, I would chant this Hare Krishna mantra, and slowly and imperceptibly, it was making a deep shift in my values, which was difficult, because if you're in a questionable career and you're starting to think of more wholesome things, there's more conflict. Initially, there's more conflict rather than any peace. And so I was charting my way to London, as was my plan, and I decided that the best way was to go through America. And I met a very well-known singer at that time, and he was very friendly, and he told me if I came to America, I could stay with him, and he would promote me to get an agent in Hollywood, and then I could go on to England. But I was a little bit half now through the power of the chanting, but I didn't know it. I was attracted to the devotees and attracted to the idea of meeting some kind of powerful spiritual person, as I was told of Srila Prabhupada. But at the same time, I was deeply entangled in a lifestyle that I had chosen. So I said goodbye to my parents. I took them to the temple, actually, for the last day before I left Sydney. And at that time, some rather clever person, I have no idea who, came up to me and said, since you're going to Los Angeles and Srila Prabhupada is there, can I give you a gift to give him? And I thought, why not? Everything was, why not? So I took it, and it was a pen wrapped up in some blue cloth and wrapped around with sticky tape. And it looked rather clumsy. But I thought, anyway, I'll just give it to them and get on with my life. So there was a series of events that led me to the temple, and also led me to be in a very shocked and shaken mood. I had a little glimpse of the dark side of what it was like to live this kind of a life. And so when I went to the temple, I was a little bit disoriented. And I was invited to go on Harinam with Vishnujan and a group of devotees who were all getting into a van. There was no seats in the van, no seat belts, none of that, just a big empty van. And somebody said to me, would you like to go? And I thought, yes, I've done this before, I'll go. So I got into the van. And when we got to Griffin Park, which is a large park in Los Angeles, below this big sign that says Hollywood, sort of looking at everything through new eyes. I'm in Hollywood, I'm in America, about to go on to England, all new and somewhat unsettling. I sat down to chant in a circle. We sat in a circle, and many long-haired, extraordinary-looking people came and sat there as well. And as we chanted, it was as if my whole life, the life I'd chosen, the values I'd chosen, the career path that I was inclined towards, it all started to come up into my consciousness. And I found myself actually crying and crying and crying by the power of the mantra and these reflections. And so when we got back into the van to go back to the temple, I felt some uncomfortable new feelings. We got back to the temple, and I realized that it was important for me to ask them if I could stay there for a week, because if I left right then, I was too open, and I would have to kind of reconnect with the materialism that was part of my journey, and I wouldn't be able to come back. It would be too shocking to go out and come back. So I felt like I need to stay here for just a few days, get a feeling of what this is, and then I can move on with my life. And so they kindly agreed to allow me to move straight into the ashram, which was quite shocking at that time, because Srila Prabhupada was living upstairs. He had an apartment, but the ladies lived in one room, which was like a schoolroom, with linoleum on the floor, and the whole front of the room was windows, like you look into a schoolroom, and there was curtain over the windows. And there was a communal bathroom and a few shelves which held communal clothes. Everybody took a sari, whichever one, it didn't matter. And on the ground with masking tape, they had marked 2 meters by 1 meter, which was your sleeping bag area.
Wow.
And I don't know if we had a yoga mat. I think we must have had something underneath the sleeping bag. And at the end, there was a box, 2 boxes, like 2 cubes. And that was where you put your things. And everyone living there was living like that. And I moved in there, and I was like actually quite horrified by the simplicity and the lack of furniture and the communalness of it. But at the same time, there was this sense, there's something here. You have to try and find out what it is. And each morning while I was there, Srila Prabhupada would go for a morning walk, and he'd arrive back in a car, and then he'd step out of the car onto the pavement in the front of the Los Angeles temple, and he would walk down the front area, which was not the temple then, which is now the temple, was still a church hall. The temple was behind where the museum is. So he would walk down, and they'd give him a basket, and he'd give each devotee a flower, one by one. And we would have a flower, each one given to us. And we would give him a flower first, and he'd put it in the basket, and then he'd take out a flower and give one to us. And so that was my first impression of him. As he handed me a flower, I handed him a flower, and he handed me a flower as well. And the first 2 weeks that I was there were tumultuous emotionally on the inside, because I would 1 minute be feeling so elated that I'd found this amazing community and this perfect spiritual person, and so on and so on and so on. And the next minute I would come, what about my life? What about my mother? What about my father? What about my career? What about all my friends? When am I going to get back to Australia? What's going to happen to me? And so I would go up and down, up and down. And I think I was quite hard for those devotees to live with, because they were already all acclimatized and they were doing their service and so on, whereas I was going up and down, up and down. And I had the pen, and I was thinking to myself, what do I do with this pen? And I thought, I'll never get to see that master, so I should give it to the temple president, because I recognized who he was. So I gave it to him and asked him to give it to Srila Prabhupada. And I thought further, and I thought, maybe I should throw away all my things that had come with me with my career, my makeup, my wigs and hair things, and the fancy clothes that I'd bought, and the photos of me and all these different poses and so on and so forth. Maybe I should just throw it all away. And then I would become, I've been working on this. And then I would think, maybe I should give them my money, because as long as I hold my money, I've got a way to leave. And if I really am committed, I should just give it to them. So I held the things, because one of the devotee carefully told me, just keep those things in your box, and gradually you'll find they become more and more irrelevant, and you can discard them in a more natural way. But I did give them all my money. And then I wrote to my mother and said, I've given all my money. And my mother was like, what's happening? What's happening to my daughter? And then a few weeks went by, and I realized that I saw in the temple president's room on his desk that he hadn't given the pen to Srila Prabhupada. So I asked him if he'd given the pen. He said no. So he said, you can give it. So this was an extraordinary opportunity to actually go and speak with Srila Prabhupada. And I can speak about other aspects of that. But the most important thing I wanted to repeat again was that when I came in, Srila Prabhupada noticed that I didn't have, and still mostly don't have, a strong Australian accent. I tried very hard to get rid of it, because it was very, I thought it was very uncultured. Being an actress, I should have a British accent. And so I had worked to achieve that. And so Srila Prabhupada asked very curiously, "Oh, you're from England?" And I said, no, I'm from Australia. And twice he asked me that. And then I said to him, no, but I was an actress. And then because one of the devotees in Australia, Upendra Das, was very close to Srila Prabhupada. He had been his personal servant and joined as a young boy. Srila Prabhupada had been informed by him that this actress was coming. Now, Upendra was simple, and Srila Prabhupada was not worldly minded. So it was only recently, after like 50 years, that I figured out why Srila Prabhupada thought that I was famous. Because Upendra must have told him something, and Srila Prabhupada assumed that somehow or another this famous movie actress was coming. And that was very disconcerting because I wasn't that. I was aspiring to become one day a famous movie actress. And so when he understood, I think I sensed he put these pieces together. He said to me then, he said, so you should put on plays. And this is what I would like to share the journey of this. So he said, this will attract a higher class of people. He said, now we are attracting only hippies. But if we present the culture of Krishna consciousness, we will attract a higher class of people. So I felt naturally elated to be getting this instruction from him. But at the same time, I felt rather uncomfortable about how I was going to perform it, because I wasn't a famous movie actress, and Srila Prabhupada is telling me that we should produce plays, and I'm not a producer of plays. And also, I have a sort of a sense that I'm a professional, and these people don't know anything about acting, so how could I work with them? There were so many coverings that I was thinking through. But he had given that instruction, this will attract a higher class of people. So then I was there for 6 months in Los Angeles because I had a 6-month visa. So I was thrown into, you could say, the normal day-by-day activities of the temple, which included going out on Harinam 3 times a day, morning until lunch, lunch until afternoon, evening until midnight.
Oh, wow.
I think it lasted around about 2 weeks of the time that I was there before Srila Prabhupada introduced Mangalarti. And then they curtailed the late nights. But for those few weeks or days, I'm not sure of the time, we would go down to Hollywood Boulevard, which was kind of like, I never wanted to be in Hollywood. I found it quite unbecoming, actually, kind of overly glamorous and a little fake. Yet there was so much energy there, this material movie star energy down there. And I'm walking on the stars and the pavement, people's names written, and you're walking on their names. But we're doing Harinam. And we'd stop outside some huge theater. I don't know where it was exactly. And we're all standing in a line, and Vishnujan would organize it. So everyone stood in line. Everyone wore the same. We wore either a saffron piece of cloth, we didn't have saris, or later, those who were married wore yellow. Again, just plain cloth. And we'd stand in a line, and he would stand in the front, and he would start the kirtan loud, like how most people end a kirtan. He started the kirtan like that. And we would all make a kartol roll with the kartols, and I learned how to do that. And we'd stand in line, and then after he did his little thing, we'd start dancing together. And it was amazing because it was so choreographed. And so it appealed to me because here I was coming from there to here, and I would be dancing, and I remember looking up at the stars and thinking, they don't know that I was one of them only a week ago. I was one of them. And in that first 2-3 weeks, maybe, because I think Srila Prabhupada left in August and I came in June. In the first couple of weeks, there were 2 times that the devotees were called to a film studio to play some small role, crossing a road or doing something in a film. And again, there was this same, like Krishna was saying to me, which side do you want to be on? Because there they all were, and they were doing the same things that I would do. They were talking in the same way. They had the same subject matter. They were wearing the same clothes. They were having the same bad habits. And there they were, and there I was. And only a week before, I would have been over there. So this was something that I felt that by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, I had this opportunity to see. You've taken another course now, but you've got the same talents that were given to you initially by Krishna himself. So now use them. So Vishnu John wrote a play, and then we started making all sorts of sceneries for it, funny things, like a tree made out of broomsticks with cardboard branches on it that was made upstairs in a studio room that couldn't actually go out the door. We couldn't get it out once it's finished. So it was all very, what would I say, very casual and not very focused. And then he also left. So Srila Prabhupada left, Vishnu John left. There was no trace anymore of this concept of putting on a play or doing anything to do with culture or theatre. Now it was just day-by-day life. And the temple was poor. And so we were all going out on Harinam and trying to cover services. And I was not initiated, so I couldn't do deity worship. I couldn't go in the kitchen. There were numerous things I was unable to do. And the temple president suggested a marriage for me, which meant going, first of all, the idea was Japan, but then that was sent on to maybe we should go and open a temple in Hong Kong. And as I mentioned, my husband, I had never met him before. It was given approval by Srila Prabhupada. And then I was off to Hong Kong. And at that very impromptu, disorganized wedding that took place, they needed the devotee who was making the celebrant. He needed 2 witnesses. And so he found one old man, Indian man on the street, who was willing to come. And the other one was an American lady who was living opposite us in the guest house where we were occupying from then on. And she was traveling as a puppeteer. She and her daughter had made puppets and did puppet shows. So as soon as I was married, and that was another story, but as soon as I was married and I was there installed now in Hong Kong, puppets came. And with the help of making a balloon and then paper mache on the top, you could make puppet faces. And with those puppets, we could tell stories. And they were hard work to make, but it occupied that part of my nature that needed something artistic to do. And then another thing happened at that time, and that was that my husband, when coming from Japan, unmarried, to Hong Kong, he passed through Taiwan. And in Taiwan, he met an Indian gentleman who hosted him overnight. And on his bookshelf, he saw one very small, we would call Lagdu Gopal. but we called him Bala Krishna. So he was not Lagdu Gopal to us. He was Bala Krishna. He was about this big. And he brought him with him to Hong Kong. And so he gave this little deity to me as soon as we were married. And so between the puppets and this small deity, I found lots of art things to do, which actually was the thing that kept me sane during that particular period. So I made a big house out of plastic, sheeting plastic. I had pieces cut out and put it together for this little Krishna, Father Krishna. He had a bedroom, he had a lounge room, he had a playroom, a temple room, and so on and so forth. I put lights inside, Christmas lights of different colors, and decorated it with cloth. And we put that beside the altar. And later, when I was not there, on Srila Prabhupada's first visit to Hong Kong, he came into the temple room, he paid his obeisances, and the temple was a small office that had been somehow renovated. And he paid his obeisances. When he stood up, he saw it was like a doll's house. So he went over to see, what is this? And he was looking and looking. I heard this from my husband. I wasn't present. And he was looking at it, and then at the top he saw there's this little Krishna sitting, and he went, "Oh, Hare Krishna." So that was another aspect that was going to be interplaying with me, would be something to do with the deity artistically, and something to do with performance. I didn't choose to go back towards acting for myself. I found that I was actually self-conscious of putting myself forward, physically forward, as really any part. I learned the codes of modesty for devotees, which I had never practiced previously, and I accepted them, covering the head, being a little bit demure and so forth. And so I never again kind of wanted to make a performance. But I did want to make performance at the same time, and I transferred that quite naturally to the puppets. And the puppets were easier because, first of all, you could do two at the same time, whereas if you're performing yourself, you're only one.
Right.
And I could hide. I didn't have to be the one you see, the one that was expressing all the features and facial motions and so on. And the puppets seemed to have a life of their own. So puppets became, from that point, the point of marriage, they became suddenly a part of my life. And we lived in Hong Kong for 4 years, and that's another story. And then we left without permission, and that's another story. And then we went to Australia and settled there. And that's not exactly relevant to this either, because that was more or less just getting on with life. But then in 1976, we decided that we wanted to re-engage with some kind of service role that was more directed. And my husband, with discussing with Srila Prabhupada, decided that we should move back to America, because he's American, I'm Australian. And so with our 18-month-old little girl, we traveled actually on the same plane as Srila Prabhupada, which was quite astonishing to be so close to him in an informal setting, because my relationship with him was very much affectionate, but very, very respectful only in that regard. And we arrived back in America. He wanted my husband to work in terms of education, and we also wanted that. And we ended up at Gita Nagari, which was a farming community at that time, small farming community in Pennsylvania, and a small group of devotees were living there trying to establish it. And my husband was asked to manage the school there. And none of us had much experience, and we made many mistakes, which we've understood as we matured as people in terms of raising children and so forth. But the one thing that I would say we did very, very nicely and very well was the puppet shows. It started as something to occupy that cultural element for me. I think we started one of the maybe the second puppet show we did was Dhruva Maharaj,
I
and
remember.
that was yes,
I
and that was
puppet shows.
yes, that was in 1976.
Oh
So
wow.
Srila Prabhupada was present, and I was thinking on this. I can't remember how, but somehow or another we managed to either present it to Srila Prabhupada on a video, which I don't think was very common at that time, but somehow we managed to present that puppet show. He was already in, we did not see him again personally, but it went, and he gave some comments of appreciation. And I made a series of puppets, I think maybe 6 or 7 puppets in a very simple way now, not complex like the first ones, and sent them with, I don't know who, can't remember, who went to Mayapur as a gift for the Mayapur Gurukul at that time. So it was gift for Srila, actually it was a gift for Srila Prabhupada. Gave them to Srila Prabhupada and he gave them on. But it was a small thing. It wasn't like, it didn't turn out into anything striking at that point. But it sort of gave me an idea how I could use that talent wonderfully well, because we're only sharing the Bhagavatam, Krishna book, Chaitanya Chaitamrita, and in our community, it gave me an opportunity to use my group of skills and in craft and so forth. And so we stayed there from 1976 till 1982. And the puppets became, I think we had maybe up to 20 puppet shows by the end. And I was constantly making puppets. I used to do them at night. I wasn't very good in the day. But at night I would stay up late and I'd make 1, 2, 3 puppets. And I loved it. It was a very stimulating time. And then Nishringananda in Los Angeles was beginning his ITV. And he sent us a message. We didn't know him, he didn't know us, and asked us would we like to video the puppet shows so that they could go worldwide. And I didn't think we were really up to standard, because we were just doing our small community. Whenever there was a festival, we'd make a puppet show. My husband would write it. I'd make the scenery. I'd make the puppets. He made the stage, and we'd put on a puppet show live. And people loved it. It was just part of the culture at that time of Gita Nagari, also of New York, because New York was connected to Gita Nagari, so the devotees would come from New York. And I thought that was kind of it. But Nishringananda coaxed us, and I think we did 13 puppet shows on video over 2 years. And the first year we went to Los Angeles, and it was quite amazing to have a film studio, and everything needed upgrading and improving, all the puppets, everything. And I wasn't yet, I really wanted to actually learn how to use the puppets like expertly, to move their heads when they talked, to move their hands so they didn't just go like this all the time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't to be. So we made the puppet shows, the first set, and then we went to India. My husband had wanted to work with the Gurukul in India. And I was reluctant to go because I said, I'll probably get sick. And also, what will I do there? I'm an artist. And he said, you can do puppet shows. And I said, but I can't, because you'll be busy with school teaching and I won't have anybody to partner me. But somehow or other we went. And we came back at the end of the first year and did another series with Nishringananda. And I always thought, they're so simple. This is just the beginning. People will come forward and they'll make puppets better than mine, and they'll do puppet shows better than mine, and they'll see all the funny things that I'm not able to yet work on. But there wasn't anymore. Nobody made puppet shows after that, at least videoed puppet shows after that. And so those puppet shows, they're still on YouTube.
They
And
are.
even though, yeah, and even though they're so quaint, they're so quaint, they're like, they're it. That's it. So
I'm now excited about those puppet shows again. It's been years and years, but I think I want to go back and see them now with this new vision. As you
well,
were,
it was, sorry.
no, I was thinking that as you were speaking, Prabhupada seems like in his very first meeting with you, he gave you the instruction of spreading the culture of Krishna consciousness. And right after that, there was this Jan Maharaj, and then you got married, you got introduced to puppets, and then the Laddu Gopal came in, and so it seems like the empowerment came along with the instruction of Srila Prabhupada. He was taking you right along.
It's interesting how my husband one time told me there's some sort of a theory or a way of looking at life called the acorn theory, whereby it's only when the acorn has been planted and grown into a great tree that you look back and you see the thread of how it was all leading somewhere. So at the time, I would see it a little tiny bit. Oh, this is good, this is good, this is good. But I didn't see the bigger picture. I was too short-sighted for that. But now, even actually preparing to share this with you, I've just been thinking, oh, yes, and that happened. Oh, wow, and that happened. And seeing that, yes, it's like Krishna has a plan for each one of us. And we might, on the inside, in our own mind, in our own mental world, be feeling underconfident or overconfident or unengaged or overengaged. And it's only almost like in retrospect, you look back and you see what an amazing trail that was. Even in the service of Srila Prabhupada, now that he's no longer physically present with us. So many devotees are serving him with much more intensity than I was capable of at the early stages when he was physically present. So that's a mystery.
True. And I wanted to just say that personally for me, whatever you just shared, it struck a chord. So I think when you said mystery, it's mysterious how Krishna can speak to us.
Yes. And another thing I would have to say, to be very honest, was that anything artistic was frowned upon in those days. Very much so. It was do the needful was the philosophy. Do the needful. It meant kitchen, deity worship, and book distribution. Book distribution, pujari, typist, Prabhupada's books. It was all about Srila Prabhupada's books. We're this kind of a movement and this. And this was the general themes that were running around. And that's why perhaps even I would do the puppet shows at night, because it wasn't seen then as a very significant offering. It was something that some people do because they're not good at the main things that ISKCON is meant for. And I'd like to say that, I think I mentioned this last time, that when we left Australia in 1976, after we were in Hong Kong, we left Hong Kong without permission. We stayed for some years in Australia, and now my husband wanted to go back to America, and we traveled with Srila Prabhupada. At that time, we had a darshan where he cleared up a lot of misunderstandings. And one of the things was he asked another prominent devotee who was in the room with us at the time, what is the spiritual master's instruction? And I think I mentioned this before, and he said the spiritual master's instruction is to distribute your books widely. And then Srila Prabhupada, without any emotion, but stern, at the same time, gravely, he said, do you think that the spiritual master is a dumb stone and he cannot instruct different disciples individually? That was a very helpful moment for me because I began to see that, Krishna consciousness is much broader than only simply the institution, although the institution is imperative and must be in all times protected and the standards must be kept. Yet Krishna consciousness was going to become a cultural experience for many. And it's interesting to note that at that time there weren't very many Indians involved.
Mm-hmm.
So those puppet shows went on, and then we went to live in Vrindavan. That was in 1983, September 1983. And we came to Vrindavan in 1974. As I mentioned, Srila Prabhupada requested us. We were living in Hong Kong. He was trying to stabilize us. And he asked us to come to Mayapur Festival in 74. And part of the Mayapur Festival was to go to Vrindavan. That year, this was the first official Mayapur Festival, world international one. There was a lot of sternness in Mayapur in regards to the interactivity between men and women, because the devotees who were living there were mostly men and a few very sincere ladies. And the Gaudiya Math had their eye on us as Srila Prabhupada's people. And we were very casual because that's our Western culture. And so there was lots of strictures put in place to try to stabilize a good impression. And so I didn't have a good impression of Mayapur in that visit because I felt the uncomfortableness of being a lady there at that time. And then we got on a train to go to Vrindavan. And on the train, I said, now I'm going to Vrindavan. I've never been to Vrindavan. I don't know what Vrindavan is like. So let me read the Krishna book. And so through the whole trip, it was we hired a carriage. The devotees hired a carriage. So there was nobody getting on and off, on and off, on and off. It was just us. And I just read and read and read Krishna book. And so when I got to the other side, I was expecting to see Krishna in Vrindavan. And so my eyes were colored by that. And I was a little bit shaken, a little bit nervous by the formality that was there in Mayapur. And so when I got off the train and came into Vrindavan, I was like, oh, this place I feel at home. This place I feel at home. And it was superficial because I'm such a young devotee. I don't know Vrindavan. I don't know Sridham Mayapur. I just know my impressions at that moment. But that was my first impression. And the peacocks, and the sound of the peacocks, and the dirt roads at that time, and the shops, the little tiny shops that sold all kinds of things, and the temples, old temples. So you go shopping to buy some necessities and you drop into 3 or 4 temples, famous temples of the Goswamis, just casually, they're right there. The whole thing it just stunned me. This place is amazing. So much culture, so much everything. Some of that, of course, I was imagining, as we do, but that was my first impression. And so when we were leaving in 74, and Srila Prabhupada said very spontaneously to me, I thought, although my husband says it was to us, he said, so how do you like Vrindavan? And before he could answer, I said, "Oh, it's wonderful, Srila Prabhupada." And just as quickly he said back to me, "Then you should come and live here." And I laughed and I said to him, "You sent us back to Hong Kong." Now, that was going to take 9 years before we would come to live there. But we were going to come and live there for some time. And I was going to make puppet shows there as well. I made puppet shows. I came with the care and help of Bhakti Chiru Swami. In 1986, I came to Calcutta, and with his help, and perhaps my husband's assistance, we made 3 or 4 puppet shows in Bengali from the Chaitanya Bhagavat, which was very new at that time. And we were given some money from the committee who was arranging for the centennial, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's centennial. And I think, yes, we took it back to Vrindavan and made a puppet stage, a big puppet stage, which we carried all the way over on the train in pieces, wrapped, tied together. And with a little extra, I made a little tiny puppet stage, which I kept in Vrindavan in case in the future I wanted to use it. And we traveled, myself and 3 or 4 Gurukul boys, we traveled to Mayapur and set up the stage. And with the help of one friend who I met, we put on puppet shows for that centennial. And so many Bengalis came, villagers came and sat as we presented the pastimes in Bengali. I couldn't understand them, they were recorded, but I knew the movements. So we did. And then when we came back from there, I got out the little puppet stage that I had hidden, and I started to get puppet shows ready for the first Vraj Mandal Parikrama, which was the very first time that Westerners had ever walked around Vrindavan. And in the meantime, because I was so curious about Vrindavan, I used to go down to the market and I made a friend. He was a very nice shopkeeper and he spoke a little English, and he was pious and he had a love for Vrindavan as well. And I used to sit in his shop, sometimes for hours, and ask him questions. And he told me, there's such and such a temple. There's a tree growing out of the top of that temple. And I would say, where? And he'd tell me. And next time I would go down there, I would find that temple with the tree growing out of it. And we at that time, as a society, we had not done very much parikrama of the greater Vraj area. Only rare people did that. Very rarely it was done. So he told me, there's a parikrama where you walk all around all the places of Krishna's pastimes. And I said, how long does that take? Because it sounded wonderful. And he said to me, it takes a month. And I just, like you, I thought, a month? Who could spare a month? Like my husband, it would be curious where I was if I was here for 3 or 4 hours talking. But how could somebody ever share a month with this wonderful place? And then one day, Lokanath Maharaj came to Vrindavan, and he gave a Bhagavatam class, and we were sitting in the class. And during the class, he said that the Padayatra, which had been formed to arrive in Mayapur for the Chaitanya Centennial, was going to do a Braj Mandal Parikrama. And I had a friend sitting next to me, and I immediately wrote on a piece of paper and handed it to her, and I said, I'm going. And she sent me back a piece of paper and said, I'm going too. I said, puppets. And she said, yes. And so we made a proposal to Lokanath Maharaj that please, if you would give us a bullock cart, we have a puppet stage, we'll insert it, you can set it up on the bullock cart, and you have to give us a Buddha cart and an amplifier in case there's no sound where we're traveling. And he agreed to both. And so it was that we set up this puppet stage on the Buddha cart, and we put everything inside the puppet stage that we needed. It wasn't security conscious. It was very makeshift, but we'd have to keep it somewhere carefully during the night and places.
Mm-hmm.
And we started off for going all around Vrindavan in this amazing way, all around Braj, the whole of Braj, for the first time ever. Ever. I went back in my mind. Whoever did this before? So many Indian yatras had gone, but not a Western one. And wherever we went, the villagers would stare at us. It was like a novelty. And then they'd become very ill-behaved. And they would tease us and laugh at us and poke at us and peep in the windows and bang on the doors and do all kinds of things which were interpreted by most of us as very annoying.
Mm.
And led us to think that these people weren't very nice. And I had my puppet stage on the bullet cart. And so I was putting on puppet shows. And that's another story. So I put on puppet shows in the different places until at one point I ended up in what seemed to be a serious accident between a bullock cart and a wall, and I got jammed between them. And I had to, I didn't complete that Brajmandal Prikrama. But as soon as I got a bit better, I went up to Delhi with my puppet shows, and I did puppet shows, not on a bullock cart, but we set them up and went around to different places. And then I heard that the finish of the Padayatra was in Dwarka, and I informed Lokanath Maharaj I would like to do a final puppet show in Dwarka. So myself and a friend, we got on the train with everybody else, traveled all the way over to Dwarka and did a puppet show there in the street. And then we went to Bombay. And so this was my, at that time, my attempt, a small one, to present the culture through the puppets.
And was this all in English? Were the puppet shows
in Hindi?
Hindi, okay.
Yes. In Hindi, and but I knew the movements. I didn't know that. I learned a little bit of Hindi from it, but it was in Hindi. And so then I came back and I stopped doing that. It became too hard. It was sort of hard for me to do it alone because people would come through and I'd engage them in being my assistant, and then they were only visitors, so then they would leave, and I'd continuously have to try and find a new person to team up with. But then I got more into Vrindavan, and I started making, first of all, there were no photos at that time. In the temple, there were no photographs of Vrindavan. There were no photos of the deities at that time. There was no digitalization, so you had to take the photos. I mean, people would come and they would take photos and they would go back to their country. Because people were taking photos, but there were no photos that were left and available for sale or for sharing. And so I started to think, okay, I should make photos of the deities and collect items of Vrindavan that people could take home with them, and that could be keep them in touch. And we called those memories of Vrindavan boxes. And then I went from there to the trees. I thought, these trees are the oldest residents of this place. These trees have been there and seen things that we will never see. And reading about the trees from Srila Prabhupada and other acharyas, I began to see that those trees are conscious. They're like great sadhus who were standing there with their roots of their lotus feet. And so then I started to have a sensitivity towards how wonderful it would be to know about the trees. And I've always wanted to write a book, but it's never yet I've never been able to do it, but about the trees of Vrindavan. So that was progressing. This relationship with Vrindavan was progressing. And then we had to leave Vrindavan, and that was in 1995. Now I had 2 children. They were both needing some proper education, whatever that was going to be. And so we decided to return to Australia. We returned to Australia, and I was so much missing Vrindavan because I really didn't want to leave at that time. And then by some arrangement of Krishna's, a friend sent me a gift. And it was a very small, 1-inch size deity. But as you can imagine, a deity 1 inch in size, what can you do? You can't make it garlands. You can, but they'll be very tiny. You can't bathe them very well because they might slip and disappear in the water. They're so tiny. And it was this little Krishna. So when that Krishna came, another phase began for me, which kind of connected that Lagdu Gopal Balakrishna mood with Vrindavan. These 2 things came together. And I started making things for him. I first of all made a little seat so that he wouldn't get lost. And I put him on the folded hands of my Prabhupada deity, and he sat there for some time while I tried to understand what he wanted. And then I made him a little platform to put the seat on. And then it was like with the Balakrishna, I get ideas. Oh, you could make this, you could make that. And so then I made him a little house, not a big doll's house, but a little house. And then I worked out how to make some trees. And then a festival came, and I thought it would be nice to make like a Radhakund, and the next festival, Govardhan. And we made a Govardhan on a tabletop. I mean, not a tabletop, a door. It was so big. It was made on a door. It was so big on the door, we couldn't get it out of the room. But we just played. And it was such a solace to have some connection with Vrindavan, even though we're living here in the West. And it began at a time when both my children were exploring what it was like to live in a Western environment and study in a Western environment. And they didn't want to have much to do with Krishna consciousness, which turned to be a great advantage because it also meant they didn't want to have much to do with me because I was a little bit too Krishna, Krishna, Krishna all the time. And so as they were working out their strategies and their education and so on, and of course we were living together and things were peaceful, that gave me a lot of free time during the day. And slowly I started to think of all those leelas that we had done as puppet shows that I had heard even from Srila Prabhupada in different times. And I began to think that actually maybe I could make this little Krishna and he could be part of a leela. So I found a carver in Vrindavan, although I wasn't there, who I managed to liaise with through another devotee. And I would draw little drawings and say, can you make this, tiny 1-inch figures, Govardhan Leela, Rasa Leela, and others. And then I got a little parampara made and 6 Goswamis and so many little figures made out of soapstone. And as we progressed with this, as it evolved, I also discovered that if I pressed them into a self-drying clay, I could make a mold.
That's right.
And now a mold means that I can put some clay, some polyclay, Fimo. I can put that into the mold, take it out, cut it around the edge, bake it in the oven, and now I can make people. And this was in 2000. This was like a big step forward for me, because now instead of going through the effort to get them carved in Vrindavan, bring them back, then I have to paint them. Now I can make them out of the mold and make many, many of them at night, of course, and cut them out and paint them. It's a little bit tiresome, but I could paint them all. And now I can make dioramas. I can make a Govardhan Leela. I can make a Rasa Leela. I can make Krishna dancing, Krishna singing, Krishna laughing. I can make them. And so I started making them for festivals again, same type of thing. Each festival I would try to make a diorama. Little, the dioramas are only this big because the figures are so small. And gradually we accumulated them. More and more and more of them came. And then we started to think we need a bigger house because we've got so many of these. And I even thought, I imagined in my mind, it would be wonderful to have a place where they could be set up and people would come and see them. This was sort of a dream I had. And then I thought, we could make like a sort of an ashram, men and women, women here, men there, and we could live there, and we could make like a holy dham. We could take a place and make it a holy dham, not a temple, because a temple requires certain parameters and certain priorities, but a holy place where people would come into that atmosphere and they would feel the sweetness of Vrindavan. And one or two or three people were very dedicated to the same idea. And through a series of amazing and sometimes very difficult circumstances, I found that we ended up here in Perth, Western Australia, which is a very isolated place, on a 5-acre property, which we purchased because it had a large double garage, which we thought we could turn that into some kind of a display area that people could come to. And that was in 2002. And interestingly, until then, we were living in a rented house in the suburbs with no real financial backing, nothing, just average people trying to get through life. And in 2002, I went with my husband to India, and we went to visit an astrologer. And I was just a little bit curious because I couldn't see what was going to be ahead. And when he looked at my horoscope, he looked at it and he said, when you start your, I was looking for a word, he said, when you start your institution or your organization, or he was fumbling for a huge word like that. I was just sitting there thinking, what's he talking about? He said, when you start this and this will happen, and he made some comments in that regard. But he had dropped in this idea of an organization. And when I returned there, the devotees had already found this place and were considering the possibility that we should all move there as a kind of an ashram. And we did. And we took that double garage, and we started in the year 2002, having already done 2 years of making dioramas, and began to make what became known as the Sacred India Gallery. And everyone contributed, and it was very hard work. And I made lots of mistakes as we were trying to set it up and get it moving. But finally, we completed it, and we opened in 2012.
Wow!
And every weekend we have people come to go through the gallery. It's set on the theme that I learnt in India from my time there, that if you want to approach Vrindavan, you must first go through Sridham Mayapur or Navadvip, because there you get access to the holy name. and you get access to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You get access to his teachings and the practices and the sadhana that goes along with becoming a serious devotee. And then you go to Jagannath Puri, because he went to Jagannath Puri. And it was in Jagannath Puri that he expressed his deepest sense of longing for Vrindavan. And then from Jagannath Puri, when you develop that experience, that understanding, you're developing your own internal understanding of what is Vrindavan. Then from Jagannath Puri, when you approach Vrindavan, you approach in a very deep internal way, rather than when I first went there and wandered around and liked the sweets or I liked the shops. But you actually understand what is Vrindavan. Vrindavan is Krishna's place. So this was a progression that took place over a series of years. And so I'm going to stop here on the Sacred India Gallery and let you ask questions, because there's a very important key here that goes straight into what I'd like to share with you in the next time we're together. So can I now ask you for any reflections or things you'd like to ask me?
First of all, I think what I'm in awe of is the spiritual master's instructions came to fruition. It took time, like Prabhupada said, time was the only thing that was separating. It probably took time externally, but it was definitely empowering you, and it was presenting opportunities for you. That was one thing that for me I took away, and that was, and the thing you said about the mystery. Indeed, Krishna's hand and the Guru's hand are mysterious. And the other point that you made early on was the Guru is larger than the institution. When he said that, it was a very profound point. When the devotee said book distribution, and he said Prabhupada's response was very stern. I was thinking, we cannot put the Guru, and definitely not Srila Prabhupada, in a box and say that is who he is. We cannot characterize him as only that. And so that was a profound point. And we can see that, I'm reading Shikshamrita books with certain devotees, and we can see, even if the topic is just deity worship, depending on the person and the time and the circumstance, we keep hearing time, place, and circumstance. And Prabhupada indeed did that. He talks about personality of Godhead, right? Like, so there is personalism.
Yes.
And
Correct.
therefore, there is a variety. If there is not personalism, there is not a variety. So these are, and I think there's so many nuggets, beautiful nuggets that you shared today, but some things that I can take away for myself, and certainly this aspect of creativity and bringing culture of Krishna consciousness, as I was telling you early on, that's very dear to me. So, and it's very encouraging.
I think of like the society as Srila Prabhupada gives the example of the boat, and the spiritual master is the captain of the boat. So the captain can get out of the boat. If the boat, for example, if the boat runs a leak or something happens to the boat, the captain is not the boat. So the captain will go and use another boat. So, and I think of ourselves as like we're crew members, and so we have a great responsibility to try to keep that boat intact. And as is human nature, particularly in the age of Kali, there's always disagreement. And sometimes the disagreement is based on hard egos. That's always a possibility. And sometimes the disagreement is based on the inherent nature of one person and their service, which they prioritize over another person and their service. And it's not an improper disagreement. It's a difference of perspective of priority and importance. And those ones usually can be respectfully resolved by just seeing the other person's perspective, why they feel that way. And it's tumultuous being on the boat. And you have to find your cabin, you know. And sometimes you get seasick, you know. It's all there. And I feel fortunate in a sense, in a sort of an odd sense, that now I'm in my getting a little bit late into my 70s. I think I'm 78. And so I've been through a lot of the pathway of this life's journey. And so when I see people at certain stages and they're struggling with something, I can look back and say, oh, I was too at that time. That's not the end. That's not the end of the story. You're going to go on from there. There'll be lots more things that you'll learn. There'll be lots more to gain as you proceed. And it's not that everybody has kind of the same aspiration to be a something, like someone's a musician, someone's an artist, and so on. Some people are just simply very good servants. They're very good servants, and they don't have anything that's really going to be outstanding about what they do, except that they're excellent first-class servants, and you can't really top that. So here we all are to learn from each other, and you know, we can play some music on the boat, you know, have a little sing-song over here, put on a puppet show on the boat, and stay on the boat.
Stay on the boat.
Even when it's difficult, and even when your seasickness is making you feel like, you know, I just can't come out of my room, my cabin. Stay on the boat. Srila Prabhupada will help you, as he helped me through so many what I thought of at the time as terrible mistakes. But now, in my 70s, I look back on as learning. Learning. You're learning to the machinery, how to work the machinery. So that's something that I feel it's worthy to give those who are still in the earlier stages of their life.
Thank you for offering that message of hope for us. I'm sorry, I just couldn't interrupt you when you were speaking.
Yes, but we're over time.
We are 15 minutes over the hour. So I'm sure we all want to hear about your Govardhan retreats and, you know, other things, but
yes,
you know, we want
I will share that
too.
I will be happy to share that.
Thank you.
Later.
Yes, so we will welcome you again on part 3, and I'm of course excited to hear that
Thank
part
you.
from you.
Thank you.
So thank you
Hare
very
Krishna.
much, and your words
Hare
of
Krishna.
hope and inspiration. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.